Good morning, guys, and welcome to the Wednesday, June 5th edition of the MMAOB Daily Show. I'm your host, as always, Adam Martin. Going to be taking you through the latest in MMA. As always, you guys can follow me on Twitter at MMAdamMartin. You can follow this podcast at MMAOddsbreaker.com and on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to that. Also, besides MMAOddsbreaker.com, check me out at SureDog.com, BJPen.com, MMAnews.com, and MMARings.net. Couple fight announcements to talk about today. Going to get right into it. Most prominent, of course, being the main event of UFC 242. It's official, guys. Khabib Nurmagomedov is taking on Dustin Poirier to unify the UFC Lightweight Championship. So, of course, Khabib is the UFC Lightweight Champion. Poirier recently won the interim belt against Max Holloway. They're going to fight and determine who the best lightweight in the world is. Going to be a great fight. I'm excited for this one. Poirier definitely deserves the fight. I'm glad he got it. I mean, there was a lot of rumors that Conor McGregor might get it. There was rumors maybe the winner of Ferguson or Cerrone this week and get it. The winner of that fight would be very deserving, especially Ferguson, no doubt about it. But I think Poirier winning that belt against Holloway, there should be some merit to winning an interim title. We know that in the past maybe that hasn't been the case, but in this case, I'm glad the UFC made the right choice and they gave Poirier the fight. It's a tough fight, though. I mean, Khabib's amazing. He's 30 years old, so he's right in his prime right now. 27-0. We know how good he is. He's 10-0 in the UFC. Last fought last October against Conor McGregor, UFC 229. We all know what happened there. Finished him in the fourth round with the neck crank rear naked choke thing, and then there was that incident afterwards when he jumped off the cage, and we know what happened after that. He hasn't fought since then, so it'll be 11 months between the time Khabib fights, and he'll be coming back to fight in Abu Dhabi. Definitely going to be a lot of the Muslim community supporting him there. So, yeah, and he's going to have a lot of people rooting for him to win this fight. And for Poirier, he's basically he's kind of stepping in enemy territory here. It's not like he hasn't did that before. He has many times in his career. The guy's looked amazing lately, of course. 4-fight win streak, 6-fight undefeated streak. Only lost once at the lightweight division, coming off nice win streak here. Victories over Pettis, Gaethje, Alvarez, and Holloway. I mean, Poirier's incredible. And you talk about guys that have improved over the years. Poirier is one of them, 30 years old now. I mean, I remember this guy coming up in the WEC. 2010 was his first fight against Danny Castillo. I remember talking to Danny Castillo, actually, when I worked at the Score back in 2011. I talked to him about this fight, and he said he actually thought Poirier was going to be a really good fighter one day. And, over the years, he's been solid, but never as good as he is now. Now he's an elite fighter. He's going to give Khabib a hell of a fight here, but you have to favor Khabib in this fight. Of course, the odds are out for this. They're at 5 times right now. Currently, they opened at minus 400 Khabib, Poirier plus 280. Currently, minus 350 Khabib, Poirier plus 250. I think it's going to get a little higher in Khabib's favor, if anything. Poirier's not a guy that gets a ton of respect from the bettors. He's been an underdog quite a few times, whereas Khabib basically is always a favorite. He might have been an underdog against Conor. Let me double check that. Against Conor, what was he? No, he was the favorite against Conor too. So yeah, he's always a favorite. Last time Khabib was an underdog was just double checking here. You'd have to go all the way back to the Gleason T-Bell fight. So it's been 7 or 8 years now since he's been an underdog, and he won't be here. He's a big favorite. He'll probably be an even bigger favorite. I expect Khabib to win the fight. Poirier's going to give him a good fight. He could possibly knock him out. He could knock out anyone. Poirier's got a lot of knockout power, but yeah, I mean, Khabib's a rightful favorite here. The guy is an incredible fighter. 27-0 says everything, and nice win streak in the UFC right now. So yeah, great fight. I'm glad they made it, and I'm glad that Conor McGregor didn't get that rematch. Of course, there are some things to talk about here with the Khabib contract. Ali Abdelaziz has come out, and he said that Khabib Nurmagomedov is the highest paid fighter in the UFC now after signing a new deal with the promotion. New contract for this fight and for future fights. Ali Abdelaziz is not a guy that you can trust 100%, but in this case, he probably is telling the truth. I mean, Khabib is one hell of a talent, and he just is coming off a fight with Conor McGregor, of course, that broke records for pay-per-view and stuff. Maybe Ali is not talking about Conor when he says highest paid fighter. Maybe he's just saying, oh, besides Conor. Like, who knows what Ali really means by that? But Khabib's definitely one of the top paid guys. We all know that at this point. The guy's incredible. And apparently Ali says that the UFC made him a partner of some sort. So that's kind of interesting to me. And one other thing that they said, where Ali says, again, you got to take what Ali says with a grain of salt, but he said there is a George St. Pierre clause in the contract. So if Khabib does want to fight GSP at some point, there's some sort of clause in the contract. We don't know exactly what it means, but there's a chance that that fight could eventually happen. And, Habib actually wants that fight. GSP wants that fight. The UFC didn't want to make that fight because they were worried if GSP beat Habib, they're going to lose their cash cow, and then GSP is going to retire again, just like he did against Bisping, just like he did against Johnny Hendricks. So the UFC was too reluctant to do that. And you know what? When there's so many contenders at lightweight, it makes sense that they did give GSP that fight. Although I truly believe that's a huge fight in the future. I think any GSP fight, GSP versus McGregor, is huge too. So that definitely is interesting that there is that sort of clause in that deal. But again, we don't know all the details about it. And again, you got to take what Ali Abdelaziz says with kind of a grain of salt. The last note I have about this before I get into some other fights, Dana White was on SportsCenter yesterday, and he did say that Conor McGregor wants the rematch with Habib, and he said that he does see that fight happening at some point. So it won't happen right now, but the UFC knows that Conor wants that fight. We all know the UFC likes to cater to Conor, maybe not lately, but they tend to, and I think that at some point we will see that fight. But I think Conor's going to come back and get a win. I just don't see. Obviously, it's a big draw. That rematch is going to do big numbers for sure, but I just don't see him coming off of a year-long layoff with all that rust, coming back to fight Habib a second time. Like, yes, it's going to make a lot of money, but I just see that being a really bad choice for Conor. I think he should come back, get a fight, maybe fight someone like Gaethje, which would be a great fight, or even the winner of Ferguson and Cerrone, or even the loser of that fight. Just fight someone like that, get a fight in, and if he wins that fight, then he could get a title shot. Then it'd be more realistic. But right now, I think Conor, he's just got to get another fight. He hasn't fought since last October as well, and if he's going to come back in, let's say, December and fight Habib after he fights Poirier, I just don't see that being a good idea. Again, the UFC 242 card continues to get new fights. Another one that was added to the fight is an interesting match between Nordin Taleb and Muslim Salikov. Let me just get to these guys here. Nordin Taleb coming off a decision win over Kyle Prapalik, 37 years old now, 15-6 record. Before that, lost back-to-back fights by stoppage against Sean Strickland and Claudio Silva. So, Taleb's been a solid fighter in the UFC, but I think he's slowing down a little bit. He's taking a Muslim Salikov here. Again, I said recently that they're going to keep beating up this card of Muslim fighters. This guy's named Muslim, so he's from that background. He's going to have a lot of fans supporting him. That card's going to be crazy. This guy is pretty solid. I mean, he's 2-1 now in the UFC. He's 1-1. He knocked out Ricky Rainey and lost to Alex Garcia. He also beat Melvin Clark to get into the UFC. Has a couple other wins over guys like Evan George, who used to fight in the UFC as well. And he's finished most of his fights. The fight against Alex Garcia was very disappointing. He basically gassed out and lost against a guy who gasses out even worse than him, which is surprising. But the Ricky Rainey fight, I think, showed that this guy does have a lot of finishing power. He's 34 years old, so he's an older guy as well. But I do think Taleb's on the decline right now. He's a solid fighter for sure. He may be able to grab a decision here, but I think Salikov's going to be favored pretty heavily, I would assume. So, that's an interesting fight, though. That card's getting stacked. Let me see how many fights are on that one now. UFC 242, 6 fights, including Curtis Blades versus Shamil Durahimov, which I'm assuming will be the co-main event. They might add another fight there. We'll see. And it's possible, although doubtful, but it's possible Johnny Walker could be added to that card. Another thing I want to talk about here, Johnny Walker's been officially cleared by the medical staff to train again. So that's good to hear. Of course, he injured his shoulder during his worm celebration after the knockout win over Misha Cirkunov at UFC 235. I recently had dinner with Johnny. It was like a month ago now in Brazil. Awesome guy. Loved having dinner with him and his manager, Lucas. Great guys. And they told me he was going to return soon. So it took another month, but now he's ready to start training again. And when he comes back, he's one of the top prospects at 205, if not a contender. Him, Dominic Reyes, Alexander Rakic. So that division is looking really good. So definitely looking forward to Johnny's return. And again, it's possible they could put him on this card, beef it up a bit. He would make a lot of sense as a co-main event, to be honest with you, because the UFC thinks this guy could be a star. I think he could be a star. I think everyone does, to be honest with you. So put him against someone like, I don't even know, you can't do man one now. Glover Teixeira. Put Glover Teixeira against Johnny Walker's co-main event. That would be sick. And, you'd have a lot of eyeballs on the guy because that could be card's going to do a lot of numbers. So that makes sense to me, but we'll see. Maybe they do a card in Brazil and he headlines it. I'm not too sure. Is there a card in Brazil that month? There's one in Mexico and there's one in Denmark, and there's one in Netherlands. So, that's interesting. I'm assuming Overeem is going to headline that Netherlands card, but yeah, we'll see what happens there. What else? There's a couple other fights to talk about. UFC 240, Gavin Tucker versus Sung Wu Cho's been out of that card. The same manager Johnny Walker is also the same manager of Gavin Tucker, and he's another guy I talked about with Lucas when I went for dinner with him. Gavin Tucker, 10-1, 32 years old, 1-1 in the UFC. He beat Sam Sicilian in his debut, and then was absolutely beat up like to shreds by Rick Glenn. Probably one of the worst beatdowns of all time. I've heard stories about that fight and just the aftermath of it. I've heard that he was so beat up in the back, his wife was like in tears, like seeing him. Gavin Tucker, just the way Rick Glenn beat the hell out of him, just seeing him in the back beat up. A lot of people thought he might retire, so he's coming back, but it's going to be off a 2-year layoff basically. And again, another guy, Lucas manages. They told me he had some other options, but they wanted to get a guy that basically he could beat. I guess they think that he could beat the Sung Woo Choi guy. Let me check out his record here. Sung Woo Choi 7-2. He lost his debut against Mofsar of Evolve. I don't know. Like, this guy's definitely got some potential. He's got KO power, but Tucker, he was a good prospect before that fight, so we'll see. Probably can go either way. But, I think this is kind of a fight that Tucker could win. And it's not a fight that he's going to go there and get destroyed necessarily. Although I think a lot of us thought he beat Rick Glenn and got wrecked. So hopefully this guy doesn't get beat up like that again, because from what I've heard, Gavin Tucker's a cool guy, nice guy. And we don't want to see him get hurt like he did in that last fight. Like, that was the kind of fight that people retire off of. And again, he took a 2-year layoff. He seems to be back, seems to be ready to go, but that was dangerous. And one last fight here to talk about, the UFC Uruguay card. It's got another fight added to it. It's a heavyweight bout between Rafael Peso and Cyril Gane. So, interesting fight here. So, Rafael Peso, 9-0, 30 years old. He's won all his fights by, well, most of my stoppage, 7 of them actually. He's coming off a win in LFA against Brian Heaton, who's a veteran of the sport. 30-17 record for Brian Heaton. He's fought everyone, tons of heavyweights out there. So he's not a name necessarily, but people that know the regional scene know that this guy's like a decent fighter who's been around for years. Like, he's fought everyone. Check out that guy's record. He fought Dan Sever in 2006. So he's been around forever. And he's taking on this guy, not Brian Hayden, of course, Rafael Pessoa, the guy who beat Brian Hayden. He's taking on Cyril Gane. I'm not 100% sure I pronounced his name actually. 2-0, so very, very inexperienced. 29 years old from France, but he's coming off back-to-back wins in TKO. And the last one was against Adam Diska, who's a promising prospect. And that was kind of an upset loss. He had basically knocked out everyone heading up to that fight, and he went in there and lost to this guy. So you don't really see guys with these kind of records get signed to the UFC in basically in the non-women's divisions. There are some women's fighters with 1 or 2 fights, but very rarely do you see heavyweights, or besides Greg Hardy, I guess, but very rarely do you see male fighters sign with only 2 fights. The UFC must see something in this guy they like. Again, I don't know a ton about these guys, to be honest. I'll have to look into it more, but an interesting fight for sure between 2 undefeated heavyweights. That division had seen some nice prospects added to it, just like light heavyweight, so definitely going to be intrigued by this matchup. And I think that's all I want to talk about, guys. I think that's it. Don't go away, though, because Cole Shelton's going to be joining me very shortly to do the MMAOB Daily preview show for UFC 238 this weekend. So I'm excited to do that with Cole. I'm going to basically do it right as soon as this is over. So if you want, jump in the YouTube channel and tune in and watch. But if not, watch the replay later. I'm still working on some stuff with iTunes and stuff, so that should come soon, guys, if you're the kind of iTunes listeners that I know they're out there. So I'm talking to Nick about that. We got some back-end stuff to work out, but it should be coming soon. And that's pretty much it, guys. So again, follow me on Twitter at MMAdammartin. Follow this podcast at MMAoddsbreaker.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also check me out at SureDog.com, BJPen.com, MMAnews.com, and MMAratings.net. And I'm always there to talk about MMA, guys. We'll see what happens today. I'm sure some news will break, and I'll talk about it tomorrow morning with you guys. Have a great day.